What's up? It's your boy Stevie83 and I'm back with another react. You know what I'm saying?
1. Esteban Carpio. Esteban Carpio was seated inside a third-floor interview room at Providence Police Headquarters on the morning of April 17th, 2005. He was not under arrest for murder at that moment. He was being questioned as a suspect in the stabbing of an elderly woman that had occurred the previous day. The setting was controlled, the building secure, and the interview was proceeding as a routine part of an active investigation. Carpio had been brought in after investigators identified him as a suspect in the fatal stabbing of Madeline Gatta, an elderly Providence resident in her 80s. On April 16th, 2005,
they caught his butt. Look.
Gatta had been attacked while walking near her
Got
home.
him right online.
Prosecutors later established that she was stabbed during an attempted theft of her handbag.
Like he's doing
She died from her injuries, and the case moved quickly. Within a day, detectives had located Carpio and brought him to headquarters for questioning. Inside the interview room, Detective Sergeant James L. Allen, a veteran Providence police officer with decades of experience, was participating in the interview. At some point, another detective stepped out briefly, leaving Allen alone with Carpio.
You should never do that, man.
Rapidly,
never
without
do that.
warning. Carpio physically attacked Detective Allen.
See?
During the struggle, he gained control of Allen's service weapon. Investigators and court records consistently established that Carpio fired 2 shots at close range. Detective Sergeant Allen was killed inside the interview room, within the walls of police headquarters.
No way.
The location of the killing stunned law enforcement across Rhode Island.
As it should.
Murders of police officers are rare. Murders of officers inside a secure police facility during an interrogation are almost unheard of. The incident immediately triggered emergency responses throughout the building. After the shooting, Carpio fled the interview room. He ran to a window on the 3rd floor, smashed through the glass, and jumped from the building.
How did he get away?
Despite the fall, he continued to flee on foot. He was captured a short time later by responding officers. Within less than 24 hours, Carpio was linked.
Damn. Homie got smoked, bro. Homie got smoked.
To 2 separate homicides: the stabbing death of Madeline Gatta and the shooting death of Detective Sergeant James Allen. Carpio was taken into custody and formally charged. The case moved forward on multiple counts, including first-degree murder for the killing of Detective Allen. Prosecutors presented evidence detailing the sequence of events, the physical struggle, the seizure of the firearm, and the fatal shots fired inside headquarters. The earlier stabbing of Gatta was also introduced, establishing the reason Carpio had been brought in for questioning. The defense raised an insanity claim, arguing that Carpio suffered from severe mental illness at the time of the crimes. Expert testimony was presented, but prosecutors countered with evidence of Carpio's actions before, during, and after the killings, including his attempt to escape. The jury ultimately rejected the insanity defense.
As they should.
Carpio was convicted of first-degree murder for the death of Detective Sergeant James Allen, along with additional convictions related to the killing of Madeline Gatta. The sentencing reflected the gravity of the crimes. Killing of Madeline Gatta. Sergeant James Allen, along with additional convictions related to the killing of Madeline Gatta. The sentencing reflected the gravity of the crimes. Carpio received life in prison without the possibility of parole, along with consecutive sentences tied to the related offenses. The conviction was later reviewed by the Rhode Island Supreme Court. In 2012, the court affirmed both the verdict and the sentence, finding no reversible error in the trial proceedings. The case left a permanent mark on the Providence Police Department. Policies regarding suspect interviews, officer positioning, and security procedures were re-examined in the aftermath. For Detective Sergeant James Allen, the cost was his life while performing routine investigative work. For Madeline Gatta, it was a fatal encounter during an ordinary walk near her home. Esteban Carpio remains incarcerated, serving life without parole. His case stands as one of the rare instances in which violence erupted inside a police headquarters, turning an interview room into a crime scene and altering law enforcement practices in its wake. Hollis Daniels III. Hollis Daniels III was already under arrest when he entered the Texas Tech University Police Department in Lubbock, Texas. It was early evening on October 9th, 2017. He was not being questioned about a violent crime. He had been brought in following a welfare check at his campus dormitory after police received reports of erratic behavior and possible weapon possession earlier that day. When officers made contact, they discovered drug paraphernalia. Daniels was taken into custody and transported to the campus police station for booking.
Tip, guys, for y'all that's evading the police or dislike the police. I'm not with them that much myself, but a little tip. They will come in your house and they will find something, and that will give them probable cause. Don't answer the door. Make them forcefully come in. And then if they do that, they have no warrant. You got them. It's game over. Don't forget that. Crime tip of the week.
The environment was controlled and administrative.
I'm going to start doing that every week. One crime tip a week.
Officers were completing routine paperwork. There was no active disturbance and no indication that Daniels posed an immediate threat. He was seated near a desk while processing continued. At that moment, he was not handcuffed. Officer Floyd East...
Come on, bro. Come on. I'd look at homeboy and be like, bro, what, you got a poop or something? What you looking like that for?
Jr. was assigned to handle the booking.
What?
East was 46 years old, a veteran officer with the Texas Tech Police Department, and a husband. He was seated at his desk, focused on documentation related to Daniels' intake. Surveillance footage and investigative findings later confirmed that East's attention was directed toward paperwork when the shooting occurred.
Homeboy ain't even looking
What
at
officers did not know was that Daniels had managed to retain a firearm. Investigators later confirmed that Daniels had concealed a stolen .45 caliber pistol on his person. How the weapon was not detected during earlier contact with law enforcement became a critical question during the investigation.
Where did he have it at?
While Officer East was seated at the desk, Daniels stood behind him. Without warning, Daniels produced the handgun and fired a single round. The bullet struck Officer East in the head at close range. East collapsed at his desk. There was no struggle and no verbal exchange. The shooting occurred inside the police department itself, during routine booking, carried out by a suspect. Daniels stepped over the fallen officer and exited the building. Within moments, officers discovered East critically wounded. Emergency responses were initiated immediately. Texas Tech University was placed on lockdown as alerts instructed students and staff to shelter in place. Multiple law enforcement agencies responded as it became clear.
This is the police. Come out with your hands above your head.
Daniels ran from the area surrounding the police department and disappeared into the campus. A multi-agency manhunt followed. Law enforcement searched buildings, parking structures, and nearby neighborhoods as the university remained shut down. Daniels was located and arrested later that night, several hours after the shooting, without further injuries to officers or civilians. Officer Floyd East Jr. was pronounced dead from the gunshot wound. His death marked one of the most serious acts of violence ever committed inside a campus police department.
You got caught lacking. No, I can't be. I gotta be real. Like,
investigators reconstructed the sequence of events using surveillance footage, officer statements, forensic evidence, and records related to Daniels' earlier contact with police that day. Prosecutors focused on the setting of the crime and the fact that Daniels fired the weapon while already in custody inside a secured law enforcement facility. A Lubbock County grand jury indicted Hollis Daniels III on a charge of capital murder for the intentional killing of a peace officer. Under Texas law, the charge carried only two possible sentences: death or life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. The case moved slowly through the court system over the next several years. Pretrial proceedings addressed evidence, forensic findings, and the circumstances surrounding Daniels' arrest and escape. Throughout the process, the central facts of the case were not disputed. Daniels had been in custody. He had produced a firearm. He had fired a single fatal shot inside the police department. In February 2023, Daniels entered a guilty plea to capital murder. The case proceeded directly to the punishment phase. Jurors were tasked with determining whether Daniels should receive the death penalty or be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During sentencing proceedings, prosecutors emphasized that Officer East had been performing routine duties when he was killed.
It wasn't his fault.
They highlighted the absence of provocation, the location of the shooting, and the breach of custodial security. Defense attorneys presented mitigating evidence, but did not contest the core sequence of events. On February 24, 2023, the jury reached its decision. Hollis Daniels III was sentenced to
See
life
ya.
imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The death penalty was rejected. Daniels was
want that.
transferred
They
into the
was-
custody of the Texas
would
Department
want
of
that.
Criminal Justice, where he will remain incarcerated
On
for
the
the rest of his
chain.
life. He will never be
Gang.
eligible for release.
He ain't
Officer
going out.
Floyd East Jr. did not survive his shift that evening.
Sorry,
The
soldier.
man who killed him will die in prison.
That's good.
Number 3, Gary Rowland. Gary Rowland was already in custody when the situation turned fatal. It was May 16th, 2022, and he was being questioned by law enforcement outside a sheriff's office in Western. Outstanding warrants tied to drug and firearm offenses and parole violations.
PD.
By the time the interview began, officers believed he was unarmed and under control.
Shit.
Well,
so they thought.
He was not.
Bruh.
Rowland was seated with investigators connected to a U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration task force.
Big boy charges.
Among them was Chief Deputy Jody Cash of the Callaway County Sheriff's Office, a veteran law enforcement officer with more than 2 decades of experience.
20?
The questioning was focused on Rowland's criminal activity and
Ain't got
outstanding
caught
warrants.
That
There
just goes to all you ops out there. If it takes 20 years, somebody gonna catch you lacking.
was no indication at that point that the interview carried any unusual risk beyond a standard custodial
Facts.
interaction. Usual risk beyond a standard custodial interaction.
Custodial
At some point during the
interaction, that's
interview,
what they call it when
Rowland
the
asked
cops
for a
get you.
cigarette. Officers agreed to the request and escorted him
Never
outside
let
the
him
building.
smoke, man.
The
Never
area
let
was
him smoke.
immediately adjacent to the sheriff's office. Rowland was still under supervision. The setting remained controlled, and no resistance had been reported up to that moment. What officers did not know was that Rowland had managed to conceal a handgun on his person despite his arrest and search.
Bruh.
How the weapon was missed has been examined by investigators.
Oh, he laid the.
But the president
Bro.
Bruh.
Bruh, they put the hitbox and then made it fall over. Come on, bro. Look at this. Look. They put the
did not
hitbox.
know was that Rowland had managed
And
to
made it
conceal a
fall over.
handgun on his person despite his
Come on,
arrest
man.
and
Look.
search.
Bop, bop, bop.
How the weapon was
And now
missed
watch.
has been examined by
Boink.
investigators.
That's
But the
crazy.
presence
Bruh.
of the firearm was not discovered until it was too late. While standing outside during the cigarette break, Rowland produced the concealed handgun. Without warning, he opened fire, striking Chief Deputy Jody Cash.
Ooh.
The shooting happened at close range and unfolded in seconds.
Fire.
Deputies on scene immediately returned fire. Marshall County Deputy Donald Bowman and Deputy Brandon Little discharged their weapons, striking Rowland. Emergency medical assistance was requested immediately
Send
for
him
both
up.
men. Chief Deputy Cash and Gary Rowland were transported to Marshall County Hospital. Despite life-saving
Now look at that. Which one do you think they pumped on the most?
efforts, both
Leave it
were
in the
pronounced
comment
dead.
section.
Chief
We don't wanna
Deputy
get it
Jody
started
Cash
today.
was 44
Not
years
today.
old at the time of his death. He had served in law enforcement for more than 20 years, including prior service with the Kentucky State Police and Murray State University Police Department. At the time of the shooting,
Thanks for
he
your
was
service,
assigned
soldier.
to a DEA-affiliated task force, working cases involving narcotics and violent offenders.
He probably shouldn't
The
have been.
shooting triggered a multi-agency investigation led by the Kentucky State Police, as is standard in officer-involved fatalities. Investigators reconstructed the events leading up to the shooting, focusing on how Rowland was able to conceal a firearm during arrest
Right.
and how the encounter escalated during what was believed to be a routine cigarette break. The findings confirmed that Rowland acted alone and that deputies responded immediately once the threat became apparent. No additional suspects were involved, and no further charges were filed due to Rowland's death. The case prompted renewed scrutiny of custodial search procedures and interview protocols, particularly in situations involving suspects with known firearm histories and parole violations. Law enforcement agencies across the region reviewed policies related to smoking breaks, outdoor movement,
Don't let
and
them do
secondary
nothing
searches.
anymore. They're not going to let you
For Chief
smoke
Deputy
anymore.
Jody Cash, the encounter ended a career spent in public service. For
Yeah, they're not going to do
investigators,
that anymore.
the case underscored how quickly control can be lost, even after an arrest has been made and a suspect appears compliant. Gary Rowland did not leave custody alive. The weapon he concealed and the brief request for a cigarette turned a controlled interview into a fatal shooting, leaving one law enforcement officer dead and another investigation
Bruh.
permanently marked by a failure that unfolded in seconds. Number 4, Jeremy Powell. Jeremy Powell was inside Jackson Police Department headquarters when the interview turned
Mississippi.
violent. It was April 4th, 2013, and Powell, a 23-year-old homicide suspect, was being questioned on the 3rd floor of the building in connection with the recent killing of Christopher
I hope, but
Alexander.
as I said before, I
The
hope it
setting
was
was a
his
secured
only
police
option,
facility.
man.
The interview
Because
was
if
part of a
not, you out
routine
there-
investigative process. What followed was anything but routine. Detective Eric Tyrone Smith, a 40-year-old investigator with the Jackson Police Department, was in the interview room with Powell. Smith was an experienced detective and a father. Another detective was also present during portions of the questioning, according to later statements from police leadership.
What?
The interview had progressed to the point where Powell was being restrained, though his exact status
He was
at that moment
bucking
would
on
later
him.
become a point of dispute. What is
Bucking.
not disputed is that Powell suddenly became physically aggressive. A struggle broke out inside the interview room. During that struggle, Powell overpowered Detective Smith and gained control of Smith's service weapon.
No way.
How Powell was able to do so became a central focus of the internal investigation that followed.
As it should.
Reports differ on Powell's restraints at the time. Some accounts state he had one handcuff still attached. Others indicate his cuffs had been unlocked during the struggle. Officials later acknowledged that the physical confrontation lasted several minutes before gunfire erupted. At some point during the altercation, Powell fired the weapon. Detective Eric Smith was shot multiple times at close range.
That sucks.
Another detective in the room attempted to return fire, but her weapon jammed.
Bruh.
She exited the room to summon help. Powell then turned the gun on himself.
What?
Investigators later confirmed
Oh, man.
that Powell shot
Cowardism.
himself with the same service weapon used to kill Detective Smith.
Cowardice.
Coroner findings cited in news coverage reported that Powell fired twice into his own body.
What?
Both men were pronounced dead shortly after the shooting. The entire
What, he gut
incident
shoot
occurred
himself?
inside police headquarters,
bang.
in a room
What?
designed for questioning suspects, not containing lethal threats.
Exactly.
Authorities confirmed that the shooting
Run up
was
on me, I'm a
captured on
threat
interrogation
always.
room video, which was later reviewed as part of the investigation.
Well, they didn't do nothing
Detective
wrong.
Eric Smith had
except
been with the
failed to
Jackson
search
Police
him, right?
Department for more than a decade. He was known among colleagues as a dedicated investigator and a committed family man.
He should
His
have been on
death
them pat
inside
downs a little
headquarters
bit
sent
better.
shockwaves through the department and raised immediate concerns
Thank you
about
for your
interview
service,
room
soldier.
safety,
Sorry about the
restraint
way you went out.
procedures, and officer positioning during custodial questioning. Jeremy Powell never stood trial for the homicide of Christopher Alexander.
That's the sad part. When they have to, the sad part is when people like this that unalive themselves, the families don't get justice. They don't get the right punishment. And then they have to live with that for the rest of their lives. And that's no good.
His death ended the criminal case against him and shifted the focus entirely to how a suspect was able to seize a firearm inside a secured law enforcement facility.
Exactly.
In the aftermath, Jackson police officials reviewed interrogation
City.
protocols and acknowledged procedural
Jackson,
failures.
Kansas.
The department examined how suspects are restrained during interviews, when restraints may be removed, and how officers maintain control in confined spaces. The incident became one of the most serious in-custody security breaches in the department's history. The killing of Detective Eric Smith was not the result of a traffic stop or a foot chase. It happened during questioning, inside a police building, during what was supposed to be a controlled interaction. In a matter of minutes, an interview
supposed to
room
be.
became a crime scene, leaving one detective dead, one suspect dead, and a department forced to confront how quickly control can be lost, even behind locked doors. Number 5. Brian Nichols.
This could be the last one of
Brian
the day.
Nichols was already in
But
custody
the
when the
most
first deputy.
evil. Now, I want you guys to stick around because this guy right here is one of the worst you've ever seen. One of the worst you've ever seen.
was attacked. It was the morning of March 11th, 2005, inside the Fulton County Courthouse in Atlanta, Georgia. Nichols was a
Atlanta.
defendant
Hey.
scheduled to appear in court on
Hey.
grape charges involving his former girlfriend.
Did he
was
say
under the
grape?
supervision of sheriff's deputies in what was supposed to be one of the most secure environments in the criminal justice system. Inside a courthouse holding
Oh, no,
area,
they put him with a
Nichols was
chick.
being managed by Fulton County Sheriff's Deputy Cynthia Hall. Accounts later established that Nichols used that moment to overpower her. During the struggle, he took Hall's service pistol. Hall was beaten severely and left critically injured, but
See?
alive. The loss of her weapon marked the beginning of one of the deadliest
They
courthouse
did her a
failures in modern U.S.
disservice.
history.
Yes, courthouse
Armed
failure
with the deputy's
for real.
gun, Nichols moved through the courthouse, inside his chambers, and shot him. Barnes died at the scene. Nichols then encountered court reporter Julie Ann Brandau and fatally shot her as well. As alarms spread through the building and deputies rushed to respond,
Look at him.
Nichols
No soul in
continued
them
toward an
eyes.
exit. Outside the courthouse, Sheriff Sergeant Hoyt Teasley confronted Nichols. Nichols shot and killed Teasley during the escape. Within minutes, 3 people had been murdered, all inside or immediately outside a secure judicial facility.
People ain't doing their
Nichols
jobs
fled
right.
the scene, initiating a massive manhunt across the Atlanta area. During his escape, he stole vehicles and evaded law enforcement throughout the day. That night, Nichols encountered David
Another
Guy
one?
Wilhelm, a federal customs agent, and shot him. Nichols then stole Wilhelm's truck and continued to evade capture. In the early hours
Oh,
of March
no, not
12,
another one.
2005, Nichols forced his way into an apartment in Duluth, Georgia.
Nah,
He took the occupant, Ashley
Don't
Smith,
tell me.
hostage. Smith was held for several hours at gunpoint. During that time, Nichols spoke extensively, and Smith later described how she remained calm and looked for an opportunity to survive. Eventually, Nichols allowed her to leave the apartment under controlled circumstances. She immediately contacted authorities, leading to Nichols' arrest without further bloodshed.
Thank you.
The investigation that followed pieced together how a defendant in custody had been able to overpower a deputy and gain access to a firearm inside a courthouse.
That's crazy.
Security
Wow.
procedures, staffing levels, and prisoner handling protocols were all scrutinized in the aftermath. The case led to nationwide discussions about courthouse safety and detainee supervision. Nichols was charged with dozens of offenses connected to the events of that day. At trial, the defense raised arguments related to mental illness,
He's probably
but
sizing
prosecutors
her up right
presented
now.
a detailed
Look at him
timeline
looking
of
at her.
Nichols' actions before, during, and after the killings. The jury rejected the defense claims and found Nichols guilty on all counts. In December of 2008, Brian Nichols was sentenced to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. The jury did not unanimously agree on a death sentence as required under Georgia law.
Wow.
4 people were killed as a result of Nichols' escape from
Then he should
custody.
have been put down.
The incident began
I'm
with a
just
single
saying.
breakdown in control inside a secure facility and escalated into a day-long series of killings that ended only when Nichols was finally taken back into custody. The Fulton County Courthouse shooting remains one of the most significant examples of how quickly a custodial failure can turn a controlled legal proceeding into a mass casualty event. These cases all began the same way, with suspects already under police control. In each instance, custody was assumed to mean safety.
Right.
It did not.
I'm going to tell you, that's where we're going to stop it today. But I'm going to ask, and I hope each and every one of y'all take the people around you seriously. If someone's saying they're going to do something, take them for what they say. Because a lot of people say they're going to do it and they don't, which is a good thing. But the ones that say they're going to do it and actually do it, you got to pay attention in life. My subscribers, just keep your head on a swivel. We'll see you tomorrow. Peace.